It's early season college football. We had games last night. NC State, Wake Forest, UNC. No particular order there, just start times.
And delays.
And with delays, it kind of sorted itself out even more. You could kind of watch them in stages. Today is a test for us. Yesterday was a test for those teams. Today will be a test for Duke. We'll talk about it. But today is also a test for us. And when I say us, I mean the media, I mean the fan bases, I mean the casual fans, I mean everyone that's paying attention. We've been waiting for something real to talk about in college football for so long, and we finally have it. Today's test is a test in our self-control. It's a test in our ability to think calmly. Take a couple deep breaths. Go for a walk. Get a glass of water, right? Do the things that can bring us down to earth from overreaction.
You see, this is good, Tim, because I've never been more excited to see you in studio since yesterday when you were out at Carter Philly Stadium. It was a little toasty. I was also back here holding things together with glue and tape, just like NC State's offense and defense was doing for a majority of the game last night. So I feel like this is much needed for a lot of our listeners.
There will be temptation to smash panic buttons. For UNC, there will be temptations to smash panic buttons as well. And maybe even Wake Forest, right? I know they won by a bunch, but it wasn't the smoothest thing in the world. But I am resisting. I am taking a deep breath, and I am not smashing the panic button. First of all, and this is the most important part, they all won. State, Wake, UNC, they all won. So despite the temptation for State fans to run to this show or run to their friends or run to the message boards or run to Twitter or run to their buddies that are also fans of the team and say, the offensive line, what the heck was that? You have Anthony Belton, who's a future pro. You have Zeke Correll, who's a Notre Dame transfer. Don't do that. As much as you are tempted to say Grayson McCall missed on some throws that he needs to be automatic with, that will allow the playmakers to flourish in ways that NC State hasn't seen in a while, don't do that. I'm not going to sit here and say that at times yesterday NC State's offense reverted back to last year's pattern of boring play on first down, boring play on second down. I hope Casey Concepcion can bail us out on third. I'm not going to talk about that. See what I'm doing here? I'm kind of talking about it without talking about it.
Yep.
I'm saying don't let that be the only story. I'm not going to say about UNC that after one game, it appears the cliche of if you have two quarterbacks, you actually have no quarterbacks has quite a bit of truth behind it. But I'm not going to say that because it's too early to say that. And when you escape with a win, it gives you time to figure it out. And in Wake Forest's case, obviously it appears as if they rolled out the wrong quarterback first. Michael Kern was out there, wouldn't even say he played bad, would just say the offense wasn't clicking under his control, and it was under Hank Bachmeier much more. It's and then obviously they didn't just escape with a win. They won by a whole bunch. But there's elements in all of these games that were silver linings. Not the smallest of which being they won the game. You escaped from catastrophe. Right? If any of those three teams lost those games, I think today, and played the same way they played, I think today we'd come in here and you'd have to reevaluate goals. You'd have to talk about, all right, are they chasing bowl eligibility? Are they chasing an ACC championship? Are they chasing certain win totals? And you'd have to reevaluate. All of your big and lofty goals are still on the table after week one.
Well, after the first quarter, you would have thought that the lofty goals that were expected of NC State this season were already out the window. After you got done your live show, you went up to the press box where you usually sit at Carter Philly Stadium for NC State games. I had the pleasure of being outside in the thick of it. And, Tim, I thought we were going to have to just open up the phone lines when we started this show. I mean, When Western Carolina was up by 3, there was 2 comments that stuck out to me by some State fans. One, there's a reason why the center for NC State this season transferred from Notre Dame.
Zeke Correll.
And then 2, after Jordan Waters fumbled the football, they were lucky that he recovered it, sent him back to Durham. I mean, those are some of the comments you were getting early on in the game when things were not going well for the Wolfpack.
The irony, and shout out to Corey Smith. He's the tweet. He covers the team, Pack Pride, I believe. He was the tweet that I saw that said this. Jordan Waters had 333 carries with Duke.
Yep.
No fumbles.
Never fumbled.
What was it, first quarter of his first game for NC State? The ball pops out, and it's not even like a bone-crushing hit. It just kind of squirted out like a cartoon banana peel or something. It just slipped out and flipped back a couple yards.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was after Grace McCall threw the first interception in which Western Carolina scored. Was that the next drive that came out?
That first quarter was such a blur of maybe not great execution that, there's a penalty mixed in there. There was the fumble. There was the pick. There was
ejection.
There was
the ejection.
There was the dropped interception by NC State's defense to open the game. I don't exactly recall the timeline, so I don't know which one went first. But I don't even you're sitting there saying I thought we were gonna have to open up the lines. I was still at that point going, haha, what a slow start. This is going to be hilarious. Not unlike Wake Forest, right? Wake Forest started very slow, and then they ended up winning by plenty, and it looked like a domination and all that. NC State never got there, right? They needed to wake up, quote unquote, in their fourth quarter just to win by a basic margin. Okay, so there's a temptation to look at that and based on where preseason expectations were to what you saw to freak out. But especially, we talked about it with State. That's kind of a preseason game for them. So I'm kind of treating it like, if the Chiefs went 0-3 in the preseason. I'm going, wow, I'm glad they ironed out I'm glad Andy Reid figured out what he needs to polish up before the real action starts next week. Tennessee next week for State, that's the real action. That's the real action. Now, I wish that everyone was able to, I wish Max Johnson didn't get hurt and threw for 300 yards for UNC. I wish that NC State didn't have to lean so heavily on KC Concepcion in a game against Western Carolina. I wish that Wake Forest offense started faster under whoever was playing quarterback. Sure, in a perfect world, all of that would happen. We're not in a perfect world. So week 1, there's an element of learning what your team does best, learning what they do poorly, and figuring out how to fix it.
That's the thing. I always say week 0, the example of Georgia Tech and Florida State across the pond last weekend, and then week 1 is where anything can happen.
Well,
because you've been so used to hitting each other in practice, and then once you finally go up against a real opponent, that's where you really see what you're made of and where mistakes can happen.
You bring up the Florida State-Georgia Tech game, and I like that this show reacted a particular way to that game because now we can apply it to these games without being hypocritical, right? It's not like we're being soft on the teams in the triangle that maybe underwhelmed in week 1 because after that Florida State-Georgia Tech game, you can go back and find it on the podcast, find it in YouTube. I said that game, Florida State lost to Georgia Tech. I said it proves that at least one of 3 things are true. This is the reaction to Florida State and Georgia Tech. At least one of 3 things are true. One of them, Florida State was a fraud. The other, Georgia Tech's a legit contender. And the third, you can't take anything from the first games of the year. You can't take anything from week 0. And there's no correlation between how they play in week 0 and how they'll play the rest of the year. If you take that same logic and apply it to these games, after watching NC State struggle with Western Carolina, we'll use that one as the example, one of 3 things are true. State, not as good as we thought. The other, Western Carolina is the best FCS team we've seen in a long time.
Yep.
Or the third, you can't take much away from those first games, and there might not be a correlation between how you play in week 1 versus how you play the rest of the season because the first week is so much about getting to know each other.